Hello, hello. Here
Hello.
we are again. Oh, your hat disappeared, Craig.
Well, it's been off for about 20 minutes.
I know, but I just
It was
you
casting
put
a shadow on my lovely face. I didn't want people to. Here it is,
okay.
everyone, seeing as we've brought it into the mix. It is a nice
Yeah,
hat, but
it's a
you can
lovely
see
hat.
now I'm obscured, which might be better for everyone else. But,
I
for
quite
me, I
like the
thought,
jacket. You've got a little bit of a,
is it,
cool kid on the block thing going on
oh,
there.
yeah. Am,
Yeah,
I- am,
fair. Oh well, no, maybe not that.
Come on.
You were going all Danny Zuko, and then the butterflies showed up, and it was
Well,
just.
I'm mixing styles.
Oh, that's very nice. That's very nice.
Yeah,
Okay.
new
All right.
trend.
Anyway, so we're back. Me and Craig are back, and we've brought back Katie Finlayson. Hello. Who you may remember from our wildly popular episode on AI and home ed.
It's my favourite
Um,
one.
anyway, so we are going to talk about the bill. Okay. So we've
Old
all been
police show
doing.
from the 90s, everyone.
I
Strap in.
know, I know. Do you know what? I would love to cut some stuff in, but then it will get cut off in YouTube for ripping off
Oh,
copyright and
we
all
could
that
just
kind
do it ourselves, couldn't we? Do,
of.
do, do, do. No, that's
Yeah.
casualty. What was the bill?
It was the two pairs of feet
Yeah, well, I can
walking
see it. I
in the
can't remember the
puddles.
noise.
Well, okay, we'll just
Anyway, we'll,
behind the
we'll do that
scenes,
later.
everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, this is going so well. Okay, right. Okay, so we've seen some messages on social media. I'm sure you have as well, which are things like start home ed now. The bill is coming, or stop the bill, or some questions like should I be worried about the bill? And so we thought we'd get together and we'd try and respond to some of this and catch people up on actually what's going on. And what is likely to happen next for home editors and when. And so we're going to focus on what is rather than what could be, because we think what's needed at the moment is a little bit of facts, okay, and some reassurance on that side. But we will come back when there are more facts to share. And we'll catch you up on kind of more detail of how any changes will work rather than how they might work. Okay, so, but I should bring in Katie at this point and say, Katie, why are you our special guest on this episode, please?
Well, I mean, it's one of my specialist subjects. I have several. But so, I mean, I am not a lawyer. I want to put that up front, but I have read all of the legal documents. I've read all of the parliamentary processes. I've done a fair amount of engagement with, MPs and lords and people from the DFE on the bill. So, as I said, I am not a lawyer. I do not have legal advice, but I've looked at this quite a lot. I feel I've got a fairly good handle on where we are, what it actually all means.
So you're smarter than the average home edder when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Oh, I don't know about that, but I've spent a lot of
Essentially.
time reading this, and one thing lots of home headers don't have is a lot of time. So
No.
I've probably read it as more than most.
Okay, but in this room, of the three of us, you're the expert, we're going to say.
Okay.
Okay. Um, so we'll talk about our kind of like our own personal sort of relationship with the bill, I guess, and a bit later. But let's clear it up. So we're calling it the bill. Everyone else is calling it the bill. What is its actual name, please?
It is the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill.
Okay.
So
All right.
it's kind of important to note there are lots of different bits to this bill. It's actually,
Mm.
it's massive. There's some children's social care stuff, there's school stuff, there's school uniforms. They've
Mm,
put a bit of social media in
yeah.
there. There's the not in school. There's some teacher regulations. So there's lots of different stuff in here. We'll only be talking about our little home ed bits, but in terms of how
Mm.
long it's taken and when people are proposing amendments or talking about it, they're talking about all of that different, all the stuff there. The whole thing has got to go through for any of it to
Okay.
start being, going into law.
Okay, so some of us have been learning quite a bit about how this all works. So, but just a couple of key points. So, how does a bill, if you've got a bill, how does it actually become law? And then when or how does that law become something that we might actually need to do something about and comply with?
Okay, so there's a whole bunch of stages, and this bill actually started like back in December 24, so it's already been kind of going on for a long time. So in each house, this one started in the Commons, and then each house has the first reading where they go, here's the bill we want to put in, and this is from the government. So they've worked on it and decided this. Then they have a second reading, which is where the MPs as a whole sort of talk about it in general terms. They have committee, where a small group go through and look at each bit of it, and then they can propose amendments back to the main house. So then you have the report stage, which is where the committee goes, we've looked at it, we're a bit worried about that, and we want to propose this amendment. And then the whole house votes on that. And then you have third reading, which is we've all talked about it, we've all agreed on it, we're okay with this version now. So done all that in the Commons. Then they do all that again in the Lords.
Right.
And in the Commons, of course, the government, so Labour at the moment, have a majority. So generally speaking, whatever the government wanted will happen, because they'll just tell all their MPs to vote for it. Like, sometimes it's a bit different, but overall that's what happens. In the Lords, that's not the case. So they don't have a majority. You're more likely to get changes through. And so we've just finished up the end of the Lords stage, where they did that whole thing again, talked about it in general, looked at it in detail, proposed some amendments. And some of those amendments are ones that actually the government proposed, partly because they'd listened to things the Lords had said. They gone, yeah, okay, actually, and all the consultation and people writing to MPs, and they'd gone, actually, yeah, that you're right, that doesn't quite work how we wanted, we'll change it. So an example there is originally they said they wanted you to notify anybody who'd given any education to your child whatsoever. Right. And we sort of all wrote to them and went, are you sure about that? Because
you haven't thought this one through, have you?
Yeah, I wrote to them
I'm
about
not sure that's going to work very well. So the government proposed an amendment that said, all right, only if it's like over some limit, which we'll set in regulations, which we'll talk about in a bit. So the government have made some changes related to problems we've pointed out, and they've made some other changes just because it took so long. So during that time, there was safeguarding reports on particular cases came in, and they had recommendations. So some of the amendments they put in came as a result of that as well, not just things that people had pointed out. They're like, actually, we've got time, we can put that in.
And the social media thing, that's all kicked off as well. It's like,
and that's again,
we can hang that one on here as well. And
yeah. So there is a bit of, we just want to make a point. It kind of fits. We'll use this to do it.
Yeah.
So that's coming from the Lords. So anyway, the Lords have now got to the point where they've gone, well, this is the version of the bill that we're happy with.
Right.
That now has to go back to the Commons. Both of them have got to agree on the same version. And what usually happens, we call this ping pong, where it goes back to the Commons and they look at each of those amendments and they either say, yep, fine. They say, no, we're not having that at all. Or they say, well, okay, I kind of see a point. How about this in the medium version of compromise? So normally anything the government proposed, they go, yes, of course, fine. We've got a majority here, we'll agree to that. Often, if something came from the Lords but wasn't from the government, they'll say, no, we don't want to do that. Back to you. But they might also do that compromise thing where, so for instance, on the social media, they've already announced they're going to put some other amendment in that isn't quite what the Lords wanted, but involves some other work they've been doing anyway and is kind of halfway there.
So is it possible that this ping pong could either be like, we don't even need to bat it back to you, or how long can it go on for before they just go, no, this is ridiculous, we're just going to approve it now?
So there are sort of principles that the Lords won't block anything that the government, the elected government of the day wants to get through, and in particular had in their manifesto. Right. So there is sort of an overall limit. There's not a hard and fast time limit, but there's kind of a general principle that eventually the Lords will give way to what the government wants. I looked at previous bills, and they can go back and forth a few times. Usually it's kind of around 6 weeks-ish for that process, so sort of 2 or 3 times at most. Sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's shorter, but that seems to be average, and we're about 2 weeks into that, so we'd sort of expect within a few weeks.
Within a few weeks. So within a few weeks, it would then be the bill is done and approved. Yes, say,
so we
for
call
example.
That royal assent.
Royal assent, okay.
Stamps it. So right.
Okay.
So that is the bill receiving royal assent. There's a little bit at the end of the bill, though, which is called commencement. And that says for each bit in the bill when it actually kind of takes effect.
Right, okay.
So at the point of royal assent, because obviously it's, it's quite complicated. You can't just change things overnight and expect it to magically work. So that doesn't happen. The first thing that happens is the government then gets the power to make the regulations. So we talked
Okay.
about some of the things in the bill are subject to regulations. So that's where they kind of fill in the details, and they do that in a way that's easier to change in the future.
Okay. Okay.
So
Is the EHE guidance to parents and local authorities, is that regulations? Is that
that's
what we're
not
talking
regulate. So regulations and guidance are different.
about?
So the one that we've come across probably a lot is the pupil registration regulations.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's a legal document that says your register has to look like this, and you remove people from it in these circumstances.
Okay.
So your sort of primary legislation says you have to hold a register which is subject to some regulations.
Okay.
And then the regulations, because they want to be able to change.
Add attendance codes in and things like
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Change
Yeah.
attendance codes, change when it makes sense to be on and off the register, that sort of thing. They want to have more flexibility. So regulations are sort of in the middle.
Okay.
They are legal. They have there's different ways they have to be passed by the House, but they do get voted on, but it's kind of a much quicker process.
Do we have any regulations at the moment then that specifically talk about home educators?
I mean, home education basically isn't in law as a thing. And it sort of still isn't in law as a thing after this. This is all phrased around children not in school. And there are various different reasons you might not be in school.
Okay.
So home education it's a key one of those, but it's not the only one. So it's still not, there's still nothing in law refers to home education or homeschooling or any other words we may or may not like. But it's all just education. You know, you have a duty to provide an education. You can do it regularly by attending school or otherwise, and that's still the case.
Okay, wow, that was really helpful. Thank you, Katie. So we've got this 4-week period. Say we've got another 4 weeks until the bill gets signed off.
Yeah.
How far are we away from needing to do anything differently then? If you talk about an existing home educator, in terms of how we currently engage with the local authority, I know I just refer to the guidance that's to the local authorities and to the parents to make sure I can go along with that and make sure that I don't do more than they're requesting and stuff like that.
Yeah. So
how far are we away from any of that changing?
Quite a long time is the short answer. So at some point after royal assent, which could be straight, soon, as I said, this bill's been going on for quite a while. They've probably got quite good thinking on it. They're probably ready to go on regulations and guidance, but they've said there will be a consultation on that. That doesn't have to be a set time, but usually it's kind of 3 months or something. So some point after royal assent, they'll put out a consultation where they say, these are the regulations we're thinking of. This is the guidance we're thinking of. That might be 2 separate consultations. They might do one, then the other. They might do them at the same time. Don't know. But they'll put out their drafts and they'll put out some questions about them. And they'll give you, up to 3 months or something for everybody to put in any comments, queries that they've got.
And that'll be everyone, will it? That won't just be the focus groups they've got at the moment?
No, that will be a public consultation. So that's what they've said.
So some of us remember doing this.
We've done a bunch of them in the past. So actually, the
we remember doing this when they were going to update They were going to update the 2019. We all put our thoughts together. So it's a version of that,
doing consultations. And they do it all the time. They do it on exam stuff. Quite a lot of that has gone through consultations, and some of them can be quite quick, but this is likely to be a sort of 3-month one, probably.
So far I'm up to about 4 months before I've got a month.
Well, and then when they've got that consultation, they'll have all these responses they've got to think about, respond to, and write another document. So again, that's another.
So the 3 months is how long the consultation will be open for submission into.
That's not guaranteed. But probably.
We're taking a best guess.
So
that's not the whole consultation process.
So we're already looking, end of the year. At this point, and then they're going to, these are quite big changes. Some of them maybe they can bring in quite quickly, but some of them, like local authorities, are going to need to think of their policies, get their head around. So things like consent decisions, like how are we going to do that? How are we going to staff it? How are we going to organise it?
I was going to say staffing is going to be a huge one for local authorities, isn't it?
So it's still, so there will need to be some sort of lead in. So I think Fiona at Edge Yourself has suggested end of the year is like the earliest, and I think that's probably reasonable. So we're certainly looking some months away. And of course, kind of through all these stages, you get more and more information about what it will mean, and they may even propose some dates within that consultation. So
Okay.
they might say, we want this to start from X date. What do you think? And then if a whole bunch of local authorities go, whoa, no, that's never going to work, then they might put that back.
Yeah.
But if they all go, okay, that's fair.
What we could do is say that, how about we come back when regulations go out for consultation, and we'll do another chat when that comes out. Yeah.
Yeah, so absolutely. That's the consultation and the guidance are going to make quite a big difference, I think, to how this really looks. So once those drafts come out, and again, they will still be drafts, so they might change, but they don't tend to change that much. So that'll give us a much clearer idea of at least what they're thinking, how they think.
All right, lovely. And you don't need to wait to hear from us. We're going to put some links in the notes of like sources that we would suggest you might use to keep yourself up to date with how things are going. So that, I think that's us on the kind of quite a lot of the factual, what we actually know for sure. Let's do a little bit of speculation then. Okay, so for people who are already home educating, what changes might happen for them? So how might things, the way that they engage with their local authority, how do you think it might look if everything goes ahead the way that it's kind of being proposed at the moment? What might we notice?
Okay, so I mean, the core thing is that the local authority is going to have to maintain a register with this certain set of information on. Now, most local authorities basically do something like that already. It's not a legal requirement for them. So there's, at the moment, there's a few kind of grey areas if you say you don't want to be on their register or you don't want to provide particular bits of information. What this says is it kind of doesn't matter. Local authorities have got to do it anyway, whether you want it or not. Yeah. And there's actually quite a small subset of information that you have to provide. And so again, the local authorities say this, and if you don't provide it, the consequences you kick into school attendance orders. It's not, it's not like they're going to send you to prison if you don't tell them your address, but you are supposed to, and they can take some actions if you don't. Okay. But also it's the local authority that has the requirement to hold this register. So wherever they get that information from, even if you don't want to tell them, if they've got it from a school, they've got it from some other source, they can still hold it because they've got
council tax records
to do it. Yeah, and kind of other bits of the bill sort of encourage more of that sharing as well, which again does already take place, but this gives them a really clear legal basis for why
because a lot of them are already doing this anyway. I think you said the change, like most people are already known, as you said, Katie. Most people, most local authorities are holding that information anyway, and most of them are putting pieces of information together from different places, and they are relying on other pieces of legislation to allow them to do that. This kind of just formalises their power to do it under this umbrella, doesn't it? That to me is what it does anyway.
Yeah. And so
we've got an episode on data protection where we talk about how that kind of stuff is going on at the moment already and why it's allowed.
We might need to update that as well after the regulations kick in.
Probably. Give us time. Yeah. But and there are some bits of information that aren't particularly standardised at the moment. So one of them is about this hours spent educating. So that's quite new. And again, it's sort of not really clear how you define that, because obviously if you're sending them to school for 6 hours, you kind of count that. It's not actually very accurate either then, but it feels like it. So that works. That's where guidance is going to come in, where they say, what do you mean by that?
So that sounds like what the local authority has to do. I'm still sitting here. Do I just sit here at the moment, the way it's looking? Would I just sit here and wait to be asked for information? Or would I have to go, hey, local authority, you've never been in touch. Here's some information.
So if the local authority have never been in touch, you now have a duty. So this is where the parent's duty to tell them comes in. You do now have a responsibility to let them know, which we never did before.
And that's at point of the regulations coming in, or the point of royal assent.
So that will be within when the register, that parental duty bit of the bill commences, and that it'll be a regulation.
Yeah.
It gets consulted on sides. That will include a date by on this date. You now have a duty to tell them.
Okay, so if you are what we call under the radar, You're
Yeah.
under no obligation to pop your head up and wave a little hello
Yeah,
until the
until there's a
regulation
date to
comes
say
in.
so. I mean, again, and as has happened over all the last few years, there are all those other sources of information. So they may well actually know about you. They just haven't contacted beforehand, and this will prompt them to do so. But they may not. And I mean, we didn't have any contact from the LA for 10, 12 years. There was no particular reason to. So
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So
but yeah,
so
you
that's
will, in
helpful.
theory, and this will be in the law, and I don't know, maybe there'll be some public information campaigns. Maybe they'll just expect word to get round.
Yeah.
But yes, in theory, if you haven't had any contact, there will come a date which will be set in regulations, will be some period off when you're supposed to just go, actually, hi, I'm here. I'm home educating. These are my hours a week. And this is like other people.
It reminds me of being self-employed, right? So if you become self-employed, you are meant to notify and
absolutely
let the government know.
There's lots of different legal things that work like this, right? Where actually you're supposed to tell someone, if you're keeping pigs, we've kept pigs, you have to register as a smallholder. I just need to say
here, there is no relationship between keeping pigs and home educating. Let's just make that very clear now.
It's one of those when people go, oh, why should we be on a list? It's like, well, there's a million different reasons why you have to go on lists.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's your job to find out that this is a reason why I have to notify somebody, and this is the person I have to go and notify. But yeah, self-employment's another good.
Okay. All right. Okay. So that's your home education. And is that the only thing that's going to be different if we're existing home educators?
So you'll have to do that, and remember, this all sits alongside what happens already, where local authorities are going to ask you for information. So the other big thing that people are, has come in fairly recently, people are a little bit worried about, is home visits. So, and at the moment, this is sort of tucked away in guidance that they're supposed to think about if your home environment is suitable as part of suitability. But they've brought that much more up front. So the LA has like a formal legal requirement it's phrased as something like consider the home and other learning environments.
Right.
So, and as part of that, they can ask for a home visit. It's not a legal requirement that you have to let them, but if you don't, they have to consider that as a material factor, or it's some sort of wording that basically says, well, you don't have to, but if you don't, I don't know about that.
And that's where it's going to rely a lot on the style and the attitude of the LA to enforce that as they see
and the
fit.
Guidance, because another thing that changes here is, at the moment, the guidance is non-statutory. That means this kind of, the DfE are saying, well, this is what we think, but there's no actual legal requirement for local authorities to follow it. They generally do, because like their legal department will back them if they follow it. So they tend to, but they don't have to. Whereas with once the bill comes in, it also makes the guidance statutory.
So the new guidance,
the law, like the primary law says, when you're doing this stuff, you have to pay attention to the guidance.
Okay.
So that will make it sort of that level up in terms of how important that guidance is.
On the other hand, there's that.
That can work both ways.
It could be a good thing. I know. I was going to say it could be quite a good thing, because, then
maintain some
written down. Do you know what I mean? It's like I know what you are and aren't allowed to ask for, rather than what you should and shouldn't. So
there'll be less of the variation, which if you're in a really good LA right now, you might not be happy with. But if you're in a really bad LA, you might be, that might actually be a good thing for you.
Okay, again, so potentially could make it a little fairer, a bit more universal. There won't be that. We often get that. Which county should I move to do home educating in? Like, no, that probably won't need to be a consideration so much. Okay, I know that is going to freak people out. There are people who are going to be very nervous about home visits.
And that only comes in at two particular points, though. Okay. So one is when you're first added to the register, and that's new. So that so kind of when it's all up and running, that will either be if you deregister from school, or it will be when your child hits that, term after their 5 CSA date. So, all up and running, that's how it works. And it's also as part of the first stage of a school attendance order. So that would have to be where they decided that they were going to move into those formal processes. So as we know at the moment, there's your kind of informal inquiries, which are sort of fairly standard. Local authority goes, hey, it's been a while. Tell me some information about what you're up to. We phrase that as the written response. Normally the result to that is, yeah, okay, that looks good. Maybe it's, no, tell me a bit more about something. But then there's that second step where they say, actually, I'm really not sure that a suitable education is happening here. So I'm going to move into those formal school attendance order processes. And that starts with, we call it the notice to satisfy, but actually it's just the first stage of a school attendance order, which says you've got 2 to 3 weeks to give me some information to convince me that actually I don't need to do this. So during that phase, that's another time when the home visit, the home circumstances have to be considered, and they can ask for a home visit to do that. And if you say no, that can...
Right. So I'm thinking if anyone who's listening, whose head just went when you started mentioning home visits, little reminder, even when the bill is stamped, regulations need to go through consultation first, yes, before we even need to be panicking about any of this, or not panicking, whatever your flavour is. Okay.
So the thing is, it is actually in limited circumstances where they can sort of take it seriously, and it's when you first start home educating, and in this interim period for an existing home educator, that will be when you move on to the register. So there'll be this sort of big load at the beginning where they can ask for visits from people who are already home educating. Practically they are probably not going to do that, because you just can't suddenly visit 100,000 home educators on the day that they're required to be added to the register, or within 15 days. Like that wouldn't work. But if there are some where the LA is perhaps in a situation where they would have liked to visit and haven't been allowed to, they might use that power then.
Okay, so we will definitely come back to this when we do our next one, when we can see what any kind of draft regulations look like.
And again, they take it into account if you refuse, but you can still refuse. And if you have sensible reasons and you're offering maybe other information, so maybe their worry is that you're in a flat or something, and you say, well, yeah, we're in a flat, but there's a park down the road and we go out and it's fine. And I don't want you to visit because it's my private home space, so I don't want you to visit, but also, maybe that would be really disruptive for my child. So it's not hard and fast. It is not, there's no warrant, which is the only time people can actually come into your house.
We're back to the bill again, aren't we?
Well, yeah.
So let's put a pin in that one, because I think that is one that we want to come back to. But the point is, if as soon as the royal assent happened, if my local authority suddenly said, right, I'm knocking up, here we go, I'm going to come and knock on your door, you've got to let me in now because the bill's been signed, that's not true.
No. And again, there'll be regulations, there'll be guidance, there'll be more information coming around about how that will actually work. We don't know at the moment if that's the expectation is that really they will visit everybody, or whether the expectation is that they will only do it when there's particular concerns. That sort of thing, we just don't know yet.
All right. Oh, that's fine. We'll come back to that. So we really wanted to focus on what we know, because there's a lot of people talking about what we don't know. So let's talk about the people who might be considering home education. I doubt they'd be listening to this, but they might. Okay. So for people who are considering home education, what might be different for them in starting home ed?
So the two big changes with the bill are, one is that you're going to need consent to remove from roll. At the moment, you already do if you're on roll at a special school.
Right.
But they're also going to bring in that same idea for some children who've had social care involvement in the past.
Okay, so hold on, because you said you're going to need consent. So specific families will need consent.
Yes.
Not all families.
No, not all families. So some families that are on roll at special school or have had some forms of children's social care involvement in the past. We don't actually 100% know what that group of people will be right now, because that's one of the things where someone in the Lords who wasn't with the government brought in an amendment that would involve a lot more people in that. And we don't know yet what the government back in the Commons, whether they'll say, yes, okay, we'll do that, whether they'll say, no, actually, we liked our idea better. So we've got to wait for that ping pong to find out exactly who that will be, but it will certainly be some more people than are right now.
Okay. All right. And yeah, sorry, so that was one thing.
Yeah, so with the consent, so I said special school or children on roll at special school already need that. They're adding an extra clause to it, which is best interests. So at the moment, that's just about the education. So it's like, I'm really not, the LA at the moment could go, well, I don't know, but I can see that you're going to be educating them properly. I can't do anything about that. Whereas this will be a best interests decision as well. And again, what that really means.
That sounds really vague.
Exactly. And it's something that applies in family court and things now. It's not a brand new concept, but it is also kind of quite ill-defined. So hopefully the guidance will be a bit clearer on what that means. And again, it's not hard and fast. So it is about getting consent. It's not you're not allowed to, but you are probably going to have to lay out an argument for why it is in best interests.
And to be honest, it's probably why most parents deregister their children in the first place, because that is their best interest, isn't it? And so they're already going to have those arguments ready anyway.
Yeah. We've had to make those arguments to all of sorry, LA, you're nothing compared to Granny What's-It and Auntie Flo. They've been quizzing the hell out of us about why it's in the best interest of our child.
Yeah.
So
exactly. So it's just going to be about phrasing that, the number of people who have really thought incredibly seriously about this decision and weighed it up and not been sure. Once you've gone through all of that, it's hopefully, I've got no crystal ball, but it should just be about laying out, why you've made that decision, why it is in their best interests. And then for the local authority to check back on that. And I said, what's driving it is social care involvement, particularly where there's a concern that a parent has perhaps been abusive or neglectful, and that they're removing it from school for those reasons. So that's
which makes sense on paper to me, but it's that implementation, as you say, what's it going to look like? What's the process? Is it just going to be really subjective? But we don't know anything about how that mechanism works, do we? So,
and it is
another one to watch.
They can make sensible decisions. Whether they do is the bit we don't know yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that's another one to watch. And you said there were two things. There was consent was one. What was the other?
So the other one is there is a pilot scheme where they're going to introduce a meeting before you're allowed to dereg for everybody. So that consent will apply to particular children.
A compulsory meeting.
Yeah. So, but there's this pilot scheme will be a compulsory meeting for everyone. That is not consent. So even if obviously you've still got the options about if a suitable education isn't being provided that are there now, and LAs can always apply to anybody. But that won't be consent. It will just be you have to meet with the LA, and basically the LA has to go, you do know we're not going to pay for your exams, don't you?
Yeah.
You do know we're not sending any tutors around, don't you?
Yeah.
But you have to do that before they'll take the name off roll.
Okay. So
one of the sticking points there is the child. It says the child should be at that meeting. Again, it's not hard and fast. There will be exemptions. So that is another one where it depends on the guidance.
Should isn't particularly. It's not a definite, is it? Should?
I can't remember what the actual legal regulation was. It was there will be exemptions, but it will be things like, again, that will be the assumptions the child should mostly be there. Again, this is when you're removing from school, so it's going to be a child who has been in school previously. It's not in a way, it's not the same situation as if you've got a home ed child who's just never dealt with strangers at school before. So,
and what I was going to say was we have this come up already, right? So informally, this already happens where a local authority will have it in their policy to say we should offer a meeting.
Yeah, and that's been in the Keeping Children Safe in Education guidance for ages. That one is for the schools to offer, and it tends not to work because the school relationship has broken down.
You've already met with school hundreds of times.
Exactly. They've been at school. They've usually been meeting quite a lot. And then they've decided to deregister. And then we're like, my whole point of this was that this is not working and I don't want to be talking to you anymore. So I think that hasn't worked very well. So this is not a meeting with the school. You can request the school are there, but you don't have to. It's a meeting with the local authority.
Right.
But they're not going to remove you from school roll. So you're expected, all of the school attendance stuff still applies until you've had this meeting.
Okay. And again, like on paper, it makes sense.
Automatic. Then you go off roll. And this is a pilot scheme. So there's all the regulations and the working out and the dates that it will come in. It won't be like the day the bill passes, you have to do this.
Yeah.
And it will only be in a certain number of LAs. We don't know who those will be yet.
Okay.
But it's up to 30%. So for most people, that won't come in. But for some people, they will have to have that meeting. And then the DfE will do that for a couple of years and they'll see how it goes and then decide whether to roll it out or not.
Okay. So another thing for us to come back to. So I think the general message is, if you're hearing anything that's making you kind of go, okay, don't worry, because we will come back. We will come back, and when there's more known information for real, we will come back and we'll tell you about that.
So we think we've basically seen the shape of the primary legislation now. The only thing that is likely to change at this stage is that group of people that are involved in the consent decision. Everything else has been agreed by the Commons and agreed by the Lords, so it will probably, or is a government amendment, so will be agreed by the Commons.
Okay, cool.
I don't know what that looks like, but a lot of that is you have to do this, and we'll say in regulations what that means. So that's the bit we don't know yet.
Okay.
What the regulations and the guidance will say.
All right. Well, I think we've covered off everything that we know and some of what we think might be happening, but don't worry, it's not going to happen anytime soon. Let's have a little chat about feelings and what we can do. Okay. So, how do you feel about it? Katie, in terms of how it's going to potentially affect your home education vibe.
I mean, for me personally, we've been home educating. I had my eldest child went through without any LA involvement whatsoever. And when she started out, it was the days of Badman, where they were going to insist on coming into your home and interviewing your child without you present. And I had a really nervous 5-year-old, and that was terrifying. And yet here we are, and she's at university and she's 20 soon. So we kind of have been through this lot, and the landscape has changed a lot over that time anyway. So things have changed and we've rolled with it. We've kind of done what we needed to for our children. So I'm kind of confident I can do that, but I also know that I'm in quite a good position through having done this before and done this for a long time. And I can certainly see how younger children, and my own children, if they want to home educate, it's certainly on the cards.
Yeah.
I feel a bit sad that I don't think they'll have the flexibility that we did, but I also feel that they will be able to, there'll be more hoops. But if it's the right thing for your child, then you figure out how to deal with that.
Yeah. Okay. How about you, Craig?
I think similar to the end of what you just said there, Katie, is that I don't personally feel. The thing that this has made me feel the most is annoyed at people kind of scaremongering it for others. I see quite a lot of hyperbolization and massive conspiracy theories in elsewhere on the internet, and I just think it's not helpful. I think, as Katie said, there'll be more hoops to jump through. There'll be a bit more admin for people to do, which is a pain in the arse, isn't it? Because I've already got tons to do anyway. Of educating my child, but I think the only bit that gives me a little bit of a wobble is the potential home visit kind of scenario for people. But I think, as you say, if it's the right thing for your child to be home educated, you roll with what is there, don't you? The legislation in this country has been nice and liberal for a long time around this, and it's tightening up a bit. But I still feel lucky to be doing it in this environment than, feeling like this in France or somewhere where it's, pretty much banned. And so that's not for me where this legislation is trying to go. I think it is genuinely trying to safeguard children I don't think it needs to do that in most cases, obviously. I'm not saying that home ed is a safeguarding issue, but I think that the purpose of it is to do that. And so if you look at it in that with that mindset, I think it can make you feel better about it. Because it's not trying to make it harder for you to do it because they want to do that to you. It is ultimately to, look at the welfare of the children involved.
Mm.
That's how I feel anyway. I don't know if that was more of a statement than a feeling, but yeah, I think maybe you get the vibe from it.
Yeah. I mean, I think I probably feel quite privileged. I think that's the thing. And we were chatting before I press record. That I'm feeling, I feel quite privileged because I think it's going to be fine for us, and I'm going to be fine with it. That's okay. But yeah, it might be a bit annoying, like having to do my digital tax return every quarter now, and that's coming in and that kind of thing.
Is it?
But
We'll talk about that
to you later, Craig. That's another podcast.
I
But
that.
So I don't doubt my ability and my family's ability to handle anything that comes down the line. It would just be annoying, but I'm just feeling. I really feel for other families who are maybe coming from, like, this is brand new. They've literally just started, and now suddenly it feels like their safe space might be under threat and all this kind of stuff. And and it's all very well for us to say, calm down, stop flapping, but this is your children, this is your home. A lot of people we see are quite burnt out by the time they get to this point. Their kids are burnt out. It's kind of, can we just have a break? So those are the people that I feel for. I would say be very careful on what you're consuming on social media. Try and educate yourself. Make sure you know what the facts are, and then find support from people who are feeling calm about it. That's quite useful, is to find your buddy, find your home ed buddy who's like, it's gonna be okay, we'll get through this together, don't worry. And if that's in person, that's great. If not, get that support from your Facebook groups, your home ed groups, and trust that the community will kind of support the most vulnerable people. I think that's the thing.
Yeah. And I think it's really difficult, but it's sort of important to keep kind of two strands in your mind. And one strand is the trying to influence, what happens. So sort of my opinion is, do I think this is the right thing, and how can I influence that? And that's really important, for everybody's empowerment. If you want to do that, if you think this is not something should be happening, then there's ways to talk to, your MPs, everybody else, to try and influence that. But that is sort of slightly different from, okay, we have a democratic process. There will be a democratic process that ends up deciding what the laws actually are. And then you've got to figure out how you, in your circumstances, are going to deal with that. Like, it doesn't really, at that point, it doesn't matter if you thought this was a good idea or not. It's still the thing you've got to deal with. And so how are you going to deal with that? And that's something that, what actually is the impact of this on me, and how am I going to best prepare for it? That's kind of where you need to go. And that is all going to be a way off. And there's going to be more and more information comes out, and we're going to, there'll be more and more ways where you figure out, okay, actually, if I think a home visit is going to be really difficult and I'm asked for it, what can I do about that? And that's kind of where you can focus on when we've got that more information, when we know what actually is going to be the impact.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. So what we'll do is I think we'll wrap it up here. We'll put some links in on, if you want to keep up to date with what's going on, the progress of it. If you find that you find that empowering to have more information. If you find that overwhelming, then don't click on it. Wait until reality becomes a little bit more visible. And also just keep getting support from your community, and focus on the now. Have some fun home educating your kids. Spring's on the way. The rain might actually stop. We can get out a bit more and enjoy the delights of being able to home educate on a Tuesday when the sun comes out, and go, right, that's it, we're going out for the day, and not worry so much that it rains every weekend. So yeah, kind of get that balance.
Our
Okay,
whole
well,
thing is
thanks. Thanks.
we don't home educate for the local authority. We home educate for our children because that's the
Yes,
right thing. And if you just keep doing the right thing for your children, that's the most important thing. That's what matters.
lovely. Well, I'll stop it on that. But thank you very much, Katie, for joining us. We'll get you back when we've got a follow-up to do. And we'll be back with slightly more nonsensical chats in the near
What do you
future.
mean?
Okay, bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye.